he asked an interesting question about relating to the Bruen decision. He notes that some of those former May issue states that have had their laws changed have retaliated with laws that in some ways have made things worse for gun owners in those states. Maybe not everyone had access to a carry permit in those states before, but those that did enjoyed fairly broad protections to carry in public. And now that, at least in theory, permits are supposed to be available to anyone that meets the requirements, they've since made it so you can't really use it for much in those states. And he's asking, basically for the state of play in Bruen states that were affected by the decision and what gun rights are going to look like going forward in those states. And I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah, well, I want to get your perspective on this. You've written a lot about Bruen-Response bills and even the sort of creep of those style of bills where you're seeing, like you just described, very restrictive. I mean, even California, the SB2 is kind of a total ban almost on gun carry, even though you could technically get a permit, right? And so, some of these, the presumption flip, right? The vampire rule that people in the gun rights community call it, where you can't carry on private property unless you're invited in with a sign that says you can carry on. And we're talking about like stores, publicly accessible private property, which would make almost everywhere off limits, right? And that's actually started to move into states where they had shall issue permits already. Even your home state, Colorado, is sort of considering new restrictions. I think you're starting to see a little bit of a trend beyond those 8 states that were affected. I want to hear your view of this.
Yeah, it is sort of fascinating that this rapid retaliation in the former May issue states, they've all now since passed a form of a Bruen-Response bill or so-called Bruen-Response bill. I think in some ways that has maybe emboldened gun control advocates elsewhere, because whenever you get a big policy push, you see all with permitless carry, right? On the other side, once you get a few states, it kind of builds its own momentum and advocates look elsewhere to replicate that success. And to your point, yeah, here in Colorado, we've been a shall issue state for more than 20 years now, with pretty good concealed carry protections, not very many sensitive places. And nevertheless, this year, there is a bill being considered. There hasn't been much movement on it yet. It hasn't had its first hearing, but to essentially replicate California's SB2. It doesn't have the vampire rule, but other than that, it pretty much copies every single sensitive place restriction, which is fascinating that, like you said, it's sort of left the former May issue states and has started to come for other states. I know Washington considered one that they've since kind of pared back a little bit to just be open carry. But as it was introduced, it was also a concealed carry sensitive place restriction. So This is going to be something to keep an eye on, not just in those former May issue states, but more.
And I think it also speaks to the polarization of guns, gun politics at the state level, especially.
Yep.
Blue states, maybe it's California or New York who starts pushing the limits of something in gun policy, but it quickly spreads now to other states that aren't as deep blue as California and New York. Maybe they're trending more blue like Colorado, but it's interesting to watch. And it's the same thing in red states, right? With the permitless carry as a perfect example of that. Like, it'll start in a deeper red state and then it'll carry on through other red states, even when polling isn't very favorable towards permitless carry. It's still, there's enough momentum there from the polarized aspect of gun politics now that, it can carry you through every red state or every blue state, depending on, the policy itself. And that's not something that we've seen, I think, in a while as starkly as we're seeing it right now.
Yeah.
But I think we got time for one more question, right?
So we're coming up on time here. A lot of great questions that we're unfortunately not going to be able to get to. But we have an interesting question from Reload member Stuart. And he's basically asking, how can gun owners or people that care about gun rights speak to maybe either groups that aren't favorable to gun rights or maybe people that just don't know much about guns in general? How can there be some sort of a discourse to try to educate them on either the mechanics of firearms or firearms politics and policy, how the law looks? Because he gives an anecdote about someone that wasn't aware that when you purchase an AR-15, the magazine doesn't come preloaded with ammunition when it's shipped to you. And he was surprised that this person didn't know that. And so he wants to know, how can there be better cross dialogue with people that are gun owners and know a lot about guns and maybe people that don't know much about guns, but maybe want to be involved in politics?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I mean, it's kind of at the core of what we try to do, what I've tried to do in my career
Absolutely.
is just inform people because there is a very significant lack of knowledge on how firearms work, how policies would affect people, all that stuff across society, really. Not even just advocates in the gun control movement, but lots of people who also would, I think, in good faith, want to learn more. And my suggestion is to do as much as possible to reach out to those people and to speak with them when they ask you to. For instance, this week I was in New York. I spoke with a class at Columbia University about public policy. There's a public health policy class at Columbia University that I went and spoke to. Professor Ted Alcorn was nice enough to invite me, and we had a great dialogue with the students in that class, and they were very intelligent, informed, and had a lot they wanted to hear and learn, and we had a good back and forth. And I'd encourage people to do as much of that as you can. Like if someone's inviting you in good faith, I would go on. I mean, this is part of why I want to be out on CNN as much as I possibly can to be honest and fair and inform people of the details and the arguments on either side of the issue and let them make up their own minds. But that's my advice, at least.
Yeah. And I think it matters how you do it as well. I know there's sometimes, I think this is not just a knock on gun rights advocates, right? It's sort of an artifact of our time with social media, dunk culture and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
you see a lot of times someone makes a mistake, maybe it's in good faith, and you just get, ha ha ha, you didn't even know that AR-15 doesn't have a clip. It's a magazine, ha 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 ha. And it's like, try not to, I know sometimes it can be hard to resist if something's so obviously silly, but doing it in good faith is a way to build those bridges and to have that cross communication. I know you've talked about in your journalism career,
and it doesn't mean being like, you don't have to be shy or subtle,
sure,
right? Like you still want to be truthful, but yeah, the tone is important. The way you talk to people as human beings is going to matter a lot as to whether you have any chance of reaching them or influencing them, right?
Right. And like I was going to say, I know you've talked about in your journalism career, people reaching out to you to in good faith want to know how these things, maybe they're reporting for a mainstream outlet and they're a general beat reporter, and they say, let me reach out to Stephen. He knows about firearms. How can I make my story better? Examples like that is, I think, the best way forward is in good faith, people that actually want to learn about this stuff, being willing to speak with them. Don't be suspicious of their motives, but actually just say, hey, this is my area of expertise. This is what I can tell you about how firearms work. And I think that's the way to go forward on this sort of question.